SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In Module 7, we will start with sanitation and drainage fundamentals, and in Lecture 31, we will cover basics of sanitation and sanitation basics part 1. So, the different concepts that we will cover in this particular lecture will be on sanitation basics, key issues of sanitation, then the purpose of sewage collection, conveyance and disposal, and finally, we will talk about sewerage and sewage treatment responsibilities. So, sanitation is the proper arrangement for collection, treatment and disposal of liquid waste, we can say, and generated in urban areas, and this is the essential service that has to be provided in all urban areas. And usually this sanitation, while we would be dealing with the liquid waste part, but both sanitation includes dealing with dry refuse as well as wet refuse. And as you can understand from the term itself, dry refuse is basically the garbage, and which we deal during solid waste management through solid waste management services. And wet refuse is the discharge from latrines, urinals, bathrooms, kitchens, and other parts of the building. And this is what is covered in the sanitation services. So, in this particular course, we will be only looking into the liquid waste part, but we are not looking into the solid waste part. Now, before we go into details of sanitation, the sewerage network design and everything else, we need to understand some basic definitions. For example, when the term sewage. Now, sewage refers to the liquid waste that is generated from a community. So, it is basically primarily the discharge from latrines, urinals, bathrooms, maybe from your stormwater from your roof, stormwater from your gardens. All this could be part of the sewage. And in addition to that, we have stormwater which falls on the different parts of the urban area. So, combined sewage is basically combination of sewage and stormwater. And then we have got sanitary sewage. So, as you can understand, sewage is both from bathrooms, kitchens as well as from latrines and urinals. So, sanitary sewage refers to the discharge that comes from the latrines and urinals. Sometimes it is also referred as black water. And sludge indicates wastewater from bathrooms and kitchens, and this is sometimes referred to as grey water. Now, the reason why we treat sewage is so that or rather we convey sewage or take away the sewage very quickly from home and then treat it and then dispose it. The reason is we do not want it to decompose inside our home or premises, right. So, when we categorize sewage, we can categorize it as per fresh sewage, which is sewage which is recently originated, then raw sewage which is not yet treated, and septic sewage which is sewage undergoing treatment, and after decomposition it is called stale sewage. So, that is all about sewage, and then we look into the conveyance networks, the networks that carry sewage from your homes to the disposal point, maybe a river, maybe land. So, when we refer to sewer is basically the underground conduits and drains which carry the sewage, and sewerage is the network for collecting and conveying sewage through underground sewers. So, sewers are individual pipelines, whereas sewerage is the entire network of pipelines. And then we also come to the term of subsoil water when we design sewerage networks and all. It is basically the groundwater which enters into the sewers or the pipelines, sewage pipelines through the joints and other kinds of leaks that develop in this particular pipelines. And then we also, when we look into the buildings that are connected, then in the buildings we come to terms such as soil pipe, vent pipe, wastewater pipe, and as you already are aware of this, soil pipe is the one pipe which carries the discharge from urinals, water closets and so on. Vent pipe is the one which allows escape of foul gases from septic tanks, digestion tanks and so on. And wastewater pipe is that one which carries discharges from bathrooms, kitchen sinks and so on. So, these are the basic definitions that we will be, or rather the terms that we will be continuously using during the course of the different lectures that will follow. So, when I categorize the entire sanitation system, you can see that we have got garbage, the dry waste and also the sewage, the liquid waste, that is primarily what we are dealing with. But in addition to that, we have got industrial waste, we have got sullage, we have got stormwater. So, sullage, even though it is part of sewage, we can actually also treat it separately. I will come to that. So, garbage, as you know, it could be categorized as combustible, non-combustible, and we can even categorize it into further categories and all. So, we are not looking into this part in this particular lecture. So, we will be only looking on this side. So, in sewage, where there are different kinds of sewage treatment or sewage conveyance system. So, one is called a conservancy system and then there is water carriage system. So, these are the primary differences, but there are other categories as well. So, in conservancy system, we will go to that in the details later on, but these are the old system, I can tell you. And usually you find in villages and other places where there is no network of pipelines and all sewer and so on. So, this is where we treat the waste generated from conservancy system in night soil pits. Pits are basically hole in the ground, and that means we just put the waste in a hole in the ground and then automatically it gets treated. So, the details will come later. So, in water carriage system, we actually carry the sewage or waste, that is liquid waste that is generated via the medium of water and through pipelines, and this could be finally taken to either sewage farming, that means we use the sewage for farming purposes, or to a treatment plant as well, right. So, a treatment plant in the sense this treatment plant means sewage treatment plant, not other kinds of treatment plant. So, in sewage treatment plant, we actually treat both the effluent as well as the sludge. So, that means first when we treat the sewage, it results in effluent and also results in sludge. Then the effluent could be disposed in the natural water course, where sludge is further treated in digestion tanks, where the sludge is left for a longer period and we again get effluent out of that. We get digested sludge and we also get gases. So, gases goes to atmosphere, digested sludge could be used as manure and effluent goes to natural water course. And industrial waste, if there are different kind of waste, of course, we are not talking about chemical waste here, which has to be treated of course, but usually the waste which is primarily water, and we usually have a treatment plant or effluent plant treatment plant within the premises of that industry, because particularly in urban areas industries cannot dispose or discharge water and discharge effluents of course. So, the effluent after treatment, when it is okay, then we can dispose it in natural water course, and the sludge that is generated we can send to landfill, because industrial sludge we do not go take it to sewage farming, or for we do not make manure out of it. And similarly, from sullage, which is the water that is generated from your bathrooms, kitchens and all, along with storm water, or sullage may be part of sewage as well. This together could be taken and then disposed directly into the natural water course, or it could be used for irrigation, or in case of advanced economies where there is adequate adequate resources to set up a stormwater treatment plant, we can again have a treatment unit for that as well. So, when we talk about the different sanitation issues that plagues our country, India, then we would first like to start with the quote from Mahatma Gandhi, which is sanitation is more important than independence. So, that is the importance of sanitation. Now, sanitation is linked with public health, it is linked with public well-being, and that is the the first thing that has to be a society has to care for. And as you know that when urban planning initially started, one of the primary concerns was to develop plans or to design our cities was to make sure that the sewage or the septics or the grey water as well as the black water is actually drained off from the point of origin to disposal points. So, these sewerage networks were the first thing that was being considered, and initially when it was not being considered, people used to dispose all of this in front of their houses, and that led to a lot of pandemics, right. And so, after that people became they became more aware, and then sewerage networks or drainage networks came into being. So, when we talk about in Indian scenario, we have uncontrolled and unplanned growth in most of our urban areas, but the amount of investment that went into sanitation and drainage infrastructure build up was actually pretty less, and whatever utilities and services we had earlier, we were trying to actually keep pace with the growth and all, but gradually our utilities and services have deteriorated to a large extent. There are new projects have come up and all, but overall we would see that the entire urban areas, the utilities and services are not at par with the kind of cities that we actually want. So, so collection, transportation, treatment and safe disposal of treated sewage, it is that has to be, that is our target. That means finally when we dispose of the treated sewage, it is not going to harm any water body or a disposal point. And of course, protection of public health, hygiene, environment, these are our main concerns. So, it is not only public health and hygiene, but also the environment as well, so that the environment or the ecology is not harmed. Now, one of the biggest challenges in urban areas in India is we have a lot of slum areas, and we see indiscriminate disposal of sewage. We have already discussed that earlier when we were discussing about the issues in our first lecture, in our first module. And we see that major portion of this sewage that is generated in slum areas are unattended, and which is resulting in unsanitary conditions in slums that leads to diseases like diarrhea and other kind of both vector borne diseases as well as the diseases which results directly from water as well. So, we have seen that also in India there has been no major effort to create community awareness till the Swachh Bharat campaign, which was taken up in the last 10 years, last 7-8 years. We have the Swachh Bharat campaign, and that was the first major initiative to build up community awareness. So, before that there were programs where community awareness was part of it, but we did not see that kind of an impact. And so, this is one big thing, because whenever we talk about sanitation and drainage, it requires a lot of awareness to be created. It requires participation of users, participation of communities. Otherwise, this kind of systems will never be proper drainage systems, proper sanitary systems would never be possible. So, the other issue is urban local bodies spend a large portion of their budget for operation and maintenance of infrastructure. So, that is another issue. That means how much money that is required, probably that much money is not being generated. So, these are some of the issues. Then conventional sewerage system, the sewerage networks where we have got pipelines connecting to your houses, the pipelines convey the sewage directly to the sewage treatment plant. This is the conventional sewerage system, and this requires high investment, and but the problem is we do not have that much money to invest in at the beginning. So, many of our cities do not have this kind of system, and probably when we invest in this conventional sewerage system, it actually is not a good idea, because many of our areas sometimes we see a lot of issues like theft of certain infrastructure or certain kinds of pipelines and all, and sometimes we see that it is underutilized, and then actually it leads to chokage and blockage of those pipelines, and there are so many issues that crop up. We will discuss that eventually, but conventional sewerage is costly, it requires high investment, and it requires adequate water supply, which is lacking in many cities of India, and resource inefficient in terms of operation and maintenance as well. So, maybe some other forms of sewerage system may be appropriate for India, or maybe a mix of all the different kinds of sewerage system that is possible is actually better. So, that is also what we should explore. And then segregation of black water and grey water is not practiced in India. So, sewage contains both grey water as well as black water, and even sometimes the storm water from our roofs and all. and no proper service connection for toilet connecting to sewers. That means people, when they feel like it, they will break into the sewage pipeline and put in their pipe inside that. So, that leads to leakage and a lot of other issues. So, this proper service connections are not designed in India, and difficult to implement PPP projects in the sector due to charge recovery issues. So, this is another very big thing, means it's PPP projects which has changed the water supply sector to some extent, but in sewage sector, in this particular sector, we see very little PPP projects. So, on 2nd October 2014, the Swachh Bharat mission was launched, and I was telling you this was the first mission which not only focused on this awareness campaign, but it has a clear goal. Now, three kinds of protocol was defined, and these are called known as ODF protocols. ODF is open defecation free, and particularly targeting ULBs and wards. We are particularly looking at the urban part. And ODF protocols are actually three ODF protocols: ODF protocol, ODF plus protocol, and ODF plus plus protocol. Now, what is ODF protocol? It says that not a single person should be found defecating in the open during any time in a day. So, this is the first ODF protocol. So, right now we have achieved almost 100% coverage has been achieved. The last survey said that out of 4470 cities in India, 4360 cities have been declared ODF, and 4291 or 96% has been verified as ODF as well. So, it is not only the declaration by the ULB themselves that they are ODF, but also it has been verified by other sources. So, ODF plus protocol is not only a single, it includes the ODF basic ODF protocol, but also says that in addition to that, all community and public toilets should be functional and well maintained. So, that means it is not only people should not be found defecating or urinating in the open during any time in the day, but community and public toilets should be functional and well maintained. So, you see the role of community toilets and public toilets are very, very important. So, we see that around 54% of the cities, that is 2416 cities, are more or less following ODF plus protocol or have been able to achieve ODF plus protocol, but not all. Then comes the ODF plus plus protocol, which talks about fecal sludge, septage. Septage is basically the sludge that is generated in septic tanks, which has to be taken out at certain intervals for further treatment and all. So, fecal sludge or septage and sewage is safely managed and treated with no discharging and or dumping of untreated fecal sludge or septage and sewage in drains, water bodies or open areas. So, that means we need to achieve proper treatment of all kinds of waste in urban areas, and we should not dispose it without treatment. So, that is what it says, and we see that only 19% of cities in India are actually have been able to achieve ODF plus plus protocol. So, we have a long way to go to achieve this kind of standards. So, few more snapshots of our status, that is 31% of sewage is treated in 498 class 1 cities and 410 class 2 towns. So, this is all, but this is among class 1 and class 2 towns we see this kind of values. And primarily we see the urban poor suffers the most due to poor sanitation, the reason we were discussing earlier, and 22%, this comes to around 22% of the total population, which is a huge value. Then children under 14 years, we see a lot of money spent in fighting diseases, and that is primarily resulting from poor sanitation, and it comes to around 500 crores of rupees at 2001 prices. That is a huge amount of money. And then untreated sewage has contaminated about 75% of all surface water sources in India. So, this is a big concern that we should be very, very careful about, that sewage mixing with our open water bodies and all, and that actually makes it undrinkable or unusable for purposes such as bathing and so on. So, when we talk about sanitation, what is the primary purpose of sewage collection, conveyance and disposal? There are certain things that we need to achieve whenever any kind of sanitary system is designed. So, first of all, we have to properly dispose human excreta before it decomposes. So, this is our primary goal, because as soon as it decomposes, it will lead to not only aesthetics and odor. These are not only the problems, but it will invite lot of disease causing bacteria, and it will invite these pathogens inside will spread in that area, and that can actually lead to contamination of drinking water, and which will lead to further diseases. And taking wastewater out to prevent its stagnation, resulting in breeding of mosquitoes. So, we are aware of dengue and malaria and all the other vector-borne diseases. So, you know that most of this is result of stagnating water, and if we do not drain water, it will stagnate, and this will result in this breeding of mosquitoes. And then final disposal of sewage in irrigation fields or natural water courses after treatment, so that the receiving medium does not get polluted. So, we have to treat it to such an extent, so that the receiving medium does not get polluted. But as I was discussing earlier, if we are not able to treat most of the portion of our solid waste, then automatically these bodies will get polluted, right. So, even though we treat some part of it, and then sewage disposed in land should be treated for protecting subsoil. So, there is sewage farming. I was talking about that we can use sewage for sewage farming purposes, but we have to make sure that the subsoil is protected. And in unsewered areas, treatment of sewage should be done by septic tanks and effluent disposed through soak pit, and not to be drained off in open sewers or drain. That means, the effluent that is generated in septic tanks contains a lot of pathogens. It cannot be drained directly into the open drains or sewers. So, it has to be first treated, or it has to be disposed of via soak pit. And fertilizers and manures from sewage should be encouraged for urban areas. So, as you can see in this particular system, that sanitation begins with the collection system, of course, and ends with the disposal in streams or water or land in case of sewage farming and all. And we should target that the effluent is returned to the condition of relative purity. That means, once it mixes with the disposal body, if it is water, then probably the purity of water is still remains. And building in an urban area actually is both the termination of the water supply system and the beginning of the sewerage or drainage system, and it is the meeting place of water and waste to become sewage. So, this, as you can see in this image, this is the plumbing fixture where the water supply ends over here and the sewage system begins, or the waste system begins, and this waste system goes to the STP, it is disposed of, and then we can dispose with multiple STPs. But as you can see over here, we have a water treatment plant. If we take it somewhere over here and we have a STP, then maybe this distance in between the STP and the WTP is not adequate, and we will be getting raw water, or water with impure water into our WTP, even which may be difficult to treat, right. So, instead we should create adequate gap between our STP and WTP, so that there is no issues, and that means there is no STP upstream, and we are able to take the water, and we should also maintain an air gap between the water supply and the waste system. So, this kind of if in certain cases when the air gap is not there, in that case there may be chance of, because of pressure differences, there may be chance that waste may get into the water supply system. So, we should be careful about that. So, now that we have talked about the basic issues of sanitation in India, which needs to be dealt with, let us look into who is responsible for sewerage and sewage treatment in the Indian context. So, as per the Indian Constitution, public health and sanitation is the responsibility of the state, that is the state governments, and this entire responsibility of service provision lies within the public domain. That means, government should provide this kind of services, and this is actually provided through Public Health Engineering Department, and they are responsible for both planning and implementation of water supply and sanitation programs in the state. So, but this Public Health and Engineering Department is the state body, or it could be even a central body as well. So, they are the organization which is primarily involved in new infrastructure development and all. But gradually now many states are also having these water supply and sanitation boards, which are taking up many of the responsibilities of public health engineering department. That means they are both constructing, but they are also responsible for the maintenance as well. And in metro cities, we have while there are state boards, but similarly many big metro cities, they are big enough or adequate size, so that they can have their own separate statutory boards, and like in cities in Bangalore, Hyderabad and Chennai. And what it encourages is, because they have their own statutory boards, they can create some special purpose vehicles, and they can create it in such a way so that it is independent to a certain extent, and when being independent increases accountability, improves management and increases commercialization opportunities. So, as we have discussed this earlier during water supply or during PPP projects, that some amount of commercialization has happened even for government entities through creation of this special purpose vehicles and so on. So, in this is the basic situation, but after the 74th Constitution Amendment Act in 1992, we have seen that ULBs have been delegated with a set of responsibilities and functions as per the 12th schedule, and these are responsible for development, civic services and environment in cities. And so, as you know that, so that means the entire responsibility of providing sewerage and sanitation services come down to ULBs, and so they are both responsible for the capital investment part, institutional and management restructuring part, equitable service and public participation part, efficient operation maintenance, tariff setting, conservation and augmentation of water resources in urban areas. So, all the responsibilities of a sustainable sewerage and sanitation system is actually now the responsibility of ULBs. So, in many cities like Ahmedabad, Delhi, Kolkata, Mumbai, Pune, municipal corporations have taken up the job of sewerage and sewage treatment. So, when we because ULBs are now taking over, ULBs with its own staff, equipment and funds are supposed to do all this, and but not everything is possible to be done by the ULB, because they may neither have the technical know-how or neither have the capacity, manpower capacity. So, they sometimes award contracts to private entities as well. So, that is also that many of the task is undertaken via private operators. So, ULBs they actually depend on the grants from state and central government for capital investments, of course. So, they cannot generate funds within the ULB, that through some user charges and all, which is very difficult to get money for capital investment, because these are huge investment that is required. And in most cases, this ULB set tariff both for water supply and sewerage services together. We have discussed this earlier in our PPP lecture. And this leads to some accounting problems, and sometimes there are problems in generating funds for operation maintenance, because both the accounts are mixed up. If one there is funding spending more for one, then the other suffers. So, this kind of issues are there. Then ULBs have perennial issues of inadequate institutional arrangements and capacities. So, this is the one of the main problems that hounds this ULBs. And primarily this results in inefficient planning, implementation and OM services. And then usually they think mostly about conventional centralized sewerage system, like sewer networks, which is a costly system, and new kind of thinking is usually absent. And then inadequate and intermittent water supply results in settling down of night soils in sewers. So, this is another big issue. That means, because we don't have 24-hour water supply systems in Indian cities, most of the situation is where we have maybe a couple of hours in the morning, and in the evening we get water supply, and during the rest of the time there is no water supply. So, that actually leads to settling down of night soil in sewers. So, this is another big issue that we have to be careful about, and this leads to choking, gasification. So, you will see that H2S gas is one of the biggest problems in sewer design. So, and then we need to cut open the roads to access pipe for rectification, which leads to another set of problems altogether, right. So, these are some of the issues that we see regularly happening in many ULBs. And another big issue is the disposal of sewage is usually beyond the ULB boundary, and because it is ULB beyond the boundary, ULBs are not bothered about it. That means they do some treatment, of course, but sometimes they even, whenever the load is high, that means there is during rainy season and all, they will dispose without treatment and maybe partly treated sewage, and this actually causes a lot of health and environment problems in the disposal area. But because it is not the responsibility of the ULB, they may ignore it. So, these are some of the issues that we are facing in Indian cities. So, next, talking about the role of the central government, as you know, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the Ministry of Drinking and Water Sanitation are primarily responsible for sewerage and sewage and treatment, this kind of responsibilities. And while Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation is primarily in charge of rural areas, Housing and Urban Affairs is in charge of the urban areas. And their job is to formulate both policies, provide technical assistance to state and ULBs through via preparation of manuals and all, and or maybe sometimes funding as well. And then they sometimes act as an intermediary to direct or determine who should get the loan or a grant while money is being disbursed through plan assistance to states, right. And then central government also supports fully or partially many programs in state list, such as water supply and sanitation, and sometimes directly they will invest, and these are called centrally sponsored schemes. So, this is how the central government actually plays a role in the sewerage and sewage treatment. And in addition to that, we have non-governmental organizations where primarily responsible for capacity building, then doing micro level management of people on behalf of government, like running a sort of community based service, or maybe some sort of drain cleaning service, on those kind of services where you need to deal with many people or the laborers who will actually work on the system. So, NGOs actually take charge of that, and for this they sometimes also receives grant money from the government. Then there are regulators, they are the monitoring agencies, could be NGOs, could be ULBs, to ensure compliance to existing laws and rules, and sometimes even the service level benchmarks as well. And finally, we have citizens and communities who have another role of actually monitoring, actually and then complaining, and then actually making sure that there are problems are identified, and then finally they can ask, and through grievance filing they can actually say that these are the areas where which needs to be improved. So, we will quickly look into the different national acts and policy framework, which actually this particular sector is actually somehow connected with. Like for example, the Water Act and its amendment in 1974, this is prevention and control of pollution, this for to ensure wholesomeness of water. So, this is the first act that is connected with sewerage and sewage treatment. Then the Water Cess Act, levy and collection of cess on water consumed by consumers like industries. Then the Environmental Protection Act of 1886, which looks into improvement of the environment and its protection. The Hazardous Waste Management Handling Rules 1989. So, this is management and handling of hazardous substances, primarily with solid waste management, of course. And then Designated Best Use by CPCB 1981. So, this is we see that water body is put to use that demands the highest quality of water, and it is designated accordingly. So, this is one which directly related with restoration of water bodies and all, or use of water bodies. And then the general standards for discharge of environmental pollutants under the environmental protection rules. So, standards for emission and effluent discharge, and general standards for discharge of environmental pollutants, ambient air quality, all these are part of this. And then coastal regulation zone notification, again it is not directly related, but looks into livelihood protection, coastal area ecology, economic activities, restriction on sewage outfall. So, this is the point which is important to us, that means restrictions on sewage outfall just in coastal areas. So, there has to be certain rules that has to be followed. Then the prohibition of employment as manual scavengers and the Rehabilitation Act, which prohibits not only manual cleaning of sewers and septic tanks, and it talks about elimination of insanitary latrines to at least twin pit pore flush latrine. So, we will discuss what is a twin pit pore flush latrine in subsequent lectures. And then rehabilitation of manual scavengers in alternative occupations. So, these are the different acts that are playing a role, and finally, we have the National Urban Sanitation Policy of 2008, which is primarily the directive for proper sanitation services in urban areas. So, what does the National Urban Sanitation Policy say? It says that all Indian cities and towns becomes totally sanitized, healthy and livable, and ensure and sustain good public health and environmental outcomes for all their citizens, with a special focus on hygienic and affordable sanitation facilities for the urban poor and women. So, these are the vulnerable groups we should look about. Then it should be affordable, it should be hygienic for all citizens and good for public health and also for environment, right. So, this is the goal of our National Urban Sanitation Policy. Now, looking into the detailed goals, that is, first of all, we need to create awareness and we need to make sure that the behavior changes. So, this is not easy at all. So, lot of awareness generation has to happen before people start throwing out garbage into the drains, right. So, we have to keep on this kind of awareness campaign for a long time, and then not only awareness, maybe some amount of fines and other things also is required to actually change the behavior. Then once this is achieved, or parallelly once this is going on, we can have open defecation free cities. So, we should first make sure that our cities are open defecation free. So, I think in the Swachh Bharat campaign, this has been, we have been able to achieve this to a large extent. And access to safe sanitation and waste disposal facilities for households, community planned and managed toilets wherever necessary, and adequate availability and 100% upkeep and management of public toilets. Maybe in the last two we are still lacking a bit, but the first definitely we have been able to achieve. And then we have got integrated citywide sanitation, which is the final step, where we not only think about open defecation, but now we are actually thinking of planning the entire sewerage networks or the kind of treatment systems that we can implement in a particular urban area. And we are thinking about strengthening our different institutions, both state, city and local institutions, by building up capacities in those, and then sanitation facilities for poor communities and other unserved settlements. So, this actually will lead to the concept of fully sanitized cities, where we not only plan for just sewage treatment, but we plan for recharge, we plan for reuse and everything else. So, all these major goals will lead to the concept of finally of totally sanitized cities, where we are talking not only about open defecation free, no manual scavenging and safety equipment for sanitation workers. So, everything like every cleaning of sewers, drain, bigger channels should be done mechanically and through equipment. Then municipal sewage and stormwater drainage, recycling and reuse of treated sewage for non-potable applications, solid waste management, of course, services to the poor, improved public health outcomes and environmental standards. So, this is the concept of totally sanitized cities that that is our target. So, to conclude, the path to a totally sanitized city has got several steps, but we should start with awareness generation and behavior change. Then we should make our cities open defecation free first, and then we should have integrated citywide sanitation policies and programs which would be able to take care of all the different aspects that we discussed. And while the Swachh Bharat mission has been able to create significant impact in terms of awareness generation and to achieve targets under ODF protocol, this needs to be followed up towards compliance of ODF plus and ODF plus protocols. These are the references you can study. Thank you.